Hello, everybody. I'm Jean-Michel Duval from Université Libre de Bruxelles, French-speaking university in Brussels. And as you know, we try to organize a regular webinar to open the space to discussion, presentation for new book, new research on this community of history of sports or sociology of sports, etc. Today, we have the great chance and honor to invite Flavio de Campos, the University of Sao Paulo, USP, very well-known and very important university in Brazil and also in the world. Then it's a great honor for us. And I will give the floor to Flavio for 35 minutes maximum. And after this, we have time for the discussion, question, answer, etc. I must to say you that I'm not in Brussels, I'm in Albania for a mission of research and to give some lectures here. Then my connection is not I'm not sure on my connection. Then Jonathan will continue to manage the webinar if I have some problems. And I want to thanks a lot, Jonathan Ferreira, for all the job, for all the help. Thank you so much, Jonathan. It's fantastic to work with you, and you help to build a bridge between Brazilian research and European research, and it's a very important work. Then, thank you very much, Flavio, and you have the floor. I must to say you also that we record all the webinar. Then after this, we will put on our YouTube channel, and people, student, PhD can also follow our webinar and our discussions. Okay, Flavio, thank you, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Jean-Michel. I will try to share my presentation. I need some help. Jonathan e Rodrigo, eu estou tentando compartilhar o PowerPoint e não estou conseguindo. Tem aqui essa barrinha no superior, compartilhar conteúdo. Eu estou tentando clicar nela e eu tenho um PowerPoint aqui. E ele não está lendo.
Maybe Jonathan can. Are you hearing me or not?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Maybe Flavio can send an email to Jonathan, and then Jonathan can put on the screen for us.
Posso mandar para você por WhatsApp, Rodrigo?
Yes, and I can send to Jonathan. Let me just see where is my.
send you.
Sending to Jonathan right now. Donna.
I will open here. Okay. Can you see?
Yes.
And now?
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect,
Thank you,
perfect.
Jonathan. Eu vou pedindo para você, Jonathan, para trocar os slides depois, tá? Você vai fazendo isso para mim, por gentileza, tá?
Perfeito.
Well, I would like to thank Jean-Michel Dewell, all members of CEVIPOL from Free University of Brussels, and everyone who is joining us at this time for the opportunity to present this research, Brazilian football and devotional practices 1970 to 1994. I would like to thank Jonathan Ferreira and Rodrigo Almeida, who have been committed to this partnership and who also encouraged me to make this presentation. Thank you. I apologize in advance for the presentation being in poor English. I hope, I really hope it can be understood by everyone. This is a project is still in its initial phase, coordinated by me with the participation of a group of young researchers from USP, São Paulo. Jonathan, se você puder mudar agora para o próximo. Obrigado. The sources selected for the research are issues of Placard magazine between 1970 and 1994, which are currently being analyzed. Newspaper reports and pages dedicated to the football from the same period in São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Salvador. And the last, interviews with former athletes and members of technical commissions of football teams. Jonathan, por favor. Obrigado. The objective of this research is to understand the dynamics of devotional practices and magical beliefs in the Brazilian football environment in a process initially marked by devotional plurality and subsequently by the appearance and strengthening of evangelical and new Pentecostal manifestations. It's a great change in the magical practices in football and in Brazil. Jonathan, por favor. until the mid 1980s, records regarding religious invocations aimed at obtaining victories for teams, protections, or cures for players involved sense of Catholic devotion and gestures characteristic of magical practices of African origin, such as offerings, fugations, amulets, and blessed water. From 1984, with the official establishment of Athletes of Christ, led by goalkeeper João Leite of Clube Atlético Mineiro, a considerable change occurred. Evangelical and new Pentecostal devotional practices spread in dressing rooms, on the eve of matches, and in goal celebrations. Allusions to Jesus Christ as the provider or even the author of football feats became increasingly frequent on football fields, as well as the organization of prayer groups among athletes and members of the technical commissions. Consequently, we can observe a gradual decrease in records of religious practices of African origin. In current time, it's almost silent. Jonathan, por favor. In this slide, we can see the religious transition in Brazil about the followers. The presence and the spread of evangelical practices accompanied a similar movement in Brazilian society, whose followers went from just over 6% to 9% of the population in the 1980s. In the intense escalation of this process, evangelicals now constitute more than 32% and are expected to surpass Catholics in the next 5 years. When, please, Jonathan, the next. When considering the openly evangelical athletes in the Brazil national teams that competed in the World Cups between 1970 and 1994, we have the following situation. Between 1970 in Mexico and to 1978 in Argentina, no record of evangelical player in the national team from Brazil. In 1982, in Spain, one evangelical player, just João Leite, the founder of the Athletes of Christ. In 1986, in Mexico, two evangelical players, Miller and Silas. In 1990, five evangelical players and one Mormon, Tafarel, Jorginho, Mazinho, Silas, and Miller. And the Mormon player was Cheetah and the World Cup of Italy. In 1994, six evangelical players, Tafarel, Jorginho, Mazinho, Mauro Silva, Zinho, and Paulo Sérgio. Beyond the differences in beliefs and symbolic elements in this transformation process, the seeds of what we'll call religious agonism are sown, characterized by the implementation of a spiritual battle within football practices, based on the theology of dominion. This spiritual battle also expresses the so-called theology of prosperity, associating Christian faith with professional and financial success. That's the question, that's the point of the research. Jonathan, por favor, se puder. The periodization, the period covered is 1970 to 1994. This period is justified by two interconnected processes. From the point of view of the history of Brazilian football, two World Cup titles were won by national teams. The three-time championship in 1970 and the four-time championship in 1994. It's interesting to note that the 1970 team was coached by Mário Lobo Zagallo and had Carlos Alberto Parreira as a physical trainer. In 1994, hope was changed. Parreira was the coach and Zagallo was part of the technical staff as an assistant. In 1970, Placar magazine was launched. That's the most important magazine dedicated to football in Brazil, which played an important role in relation to politics and culture in Brazil during the military dictatorship 1964-1985. From the point of view of Brazilian political history, a tense political history in Brazil, the time frame begins in 1970 with the period of greatest repression and censorship known as the years of lead, due to the persecution, torture, and assassinations of members of the armed resistance. The end point in 1994 is the year of the second presidential elections after the dictatorship, which led Fernando Henrique Cardoso to the presidency of Brazil. It's time of democracy in Brazil. Jonathan, por favor. Senhor, obrigado. The initial investigative proposals guiding this research refer to the possibility of relating the rise of evangelical practices within football to greater disciplining of athletes and behavioral control, as well as to the establishment of prosperity theology as a basis for ostentations, expressions, and the dissemination of a neoliberal meritocracy ideology. Furthermore, understanding football as a space of ideological dispute, we will discuss the role of these changes in the process of strengthening a conservative and far-right social base observable today in Brazil and in the world, which has strong support among athletes and fans in football in Brazil. Now, in the following slides, I will present a small sample of records of devotional practices researched in editions of Placar magazine. It's a small presentation. In this slide, we can see Dentinho, goalkeeper for Vitória, a club of Bahia. We can see Dentinho and his amulets. And the goalkeeper, Dentinho, defined himself as a Catholic, but as son of Oxóssi, an Orisha of Umbanda and Candomblé in Brazil. And the protection, that's a double protection. His body and the goal protected by a spiritual protection of practice African origins. Jonathan, por favor. The next. In this slide, we can see a very important playwright in Brazil, Plínio Marcos, a very, very important playwright. He had a column in Placar magazine, and his column has like title Macumba Decides Gay. A column by playwright Plínio Marcos describing a set many devotional practices of African origin and other magical origins, like rabbit's foot, leaf, figa. Figa is a hand gesture used to make a gesture of, yes, thank you, Rodrigo, used to make a jest of good luck for the players. Plínio Marcos wrote for many editions in the Placar magazine, beautiful columns, and many columns dedicated to practices, magical practices in the football. It's a great search for us. Jonathan, por favor. That's in this slide. It's a beautiful slide. We can see Santana, a message therapist for Vasco da Gama, a club of Rio de Janeiro, and it's interesting to think several other message therapists became known for their amulets and magical practices. Among the Brazilian national team, Mário Américo and Knockout Jack stand out. It's interesting to note A year earlier, Santana, the message therapist, was almost fired from Vasco da Gama due to the number of injured players that, in the opinion of the club's management, Santana's Macumba had lost its power. It's very interesting. And his recommendation for the players. Well, the deal is a new spell I've been doing. Simple stuff. Each player carries a shrimp in their pocket all week, and the success in the game, the next game. Jonathan, por favor. Well, in this slide, 1987, we can see a Christian message. The title, at Atlético from Paraná, a Christian message emerges. That's Esdras Leitão, Atlético's messer, called brother by the players, and the recommendation, his recommendation is different than the recommendation from Santana. It's different. Fat in the Lord house bruises. We can see the change with the recommendations and the medical practices in this moment. Jonathan, por favor, próximo. In 1985, Placar magazine showed the pastors of the ball. According to the report, in this moment, there are over 300 athletes from the Evangelical Legion who have Christ in their hearts. That's the moment. That's the moment of the change in the practical and the magical practice. Jonathan, por favor. Próximo. That's a slide. The pastors of ball, and this slide show the prayer groups, two prayer groups. The first, the prayer group in the Santos Football Club. And with the active participation of a great player, Zé Sérgio. That's the most important player of Santos in this moment. And the other photograph, we can see in Minas Gerais a prayer group with the participation of athletes from various clubs, many clubs. Show the dissemination of the groups, the prayer groups in Minas Gerais. The state where João Leite are founded, the Athletes of Christ. And a próxima, por favor, Jonathan. In the same year, 1985, in Placar magazine, we can see in this slide Batista, defender of Clube Atlético Mineiro of Minas Gerais. It's very interesting how Batista is shown. The title, Batista, the erudite defender. And the photograph, the Atlético Mineiro defender is photographed in a suit and tie, playing the piano. The report highlights his musical skills and sophisticated culture. Batista was converted by goalkeeper João Leite. He became religious and another member of the Athletes of Christ Association. And a model of discipline like a player. And the last slide, Jonathan, please. It's not an evangelical player; it's a Mormon player, but it's the same process. That's Tita, a very important player of football in Brazil. It's a Mormon player, and the title from Tita, that's the good guy. The good guy. Why the good guy? What's the reasons from Tita called the good guy? Because without smoking, without drinking or cheating, Tita maintains the image of an athlete that pleases the coach, Lazzaroni, the coach of national team of Brazil. Like evangelicals, Tita's Mormon behavior offers a model of discipline to the players in this process. Thank you for attention, and I hope it's understood by my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Professor Flavio. Was a very interesting and surprising subject. There's a lot of things to think about it. Now, I will open the floor to the audience. Have some questions, some comments. Yes, you can start, Rodrigo.
All right. Professor, I will speak in English, but if you don't understand, I can repeat the question in Portuguese as well. I'd like to know if the research, of course, it's quite well understandable that you're going to use the Placar magazines as a source, historical source. But I'd like to know if you're wanting to go further on it and then try to make some interviews with players, uh, especially from this moment, from 1970s to 1994. I loved the periodization because I think it was the moment of there were a gap between our World Cup titles because it was 24 years. Like now we are 24 years without a World Cup. It's a mistake, and we must try to change it. But this other period from 1970 to 1994, we had this totally changes from Brazilian society. We had a military dictatorship. We had a country that was more Catholic than evangelical. We still are, but the gap is going smaller. And we are on the New Republic, and how those things were changed. I'd like to know more than the first question. The second question is, um, this research is planning. Are you planning to understand this, uh, the the reasons of this change in Brazilian society? Because it's for us. I know there are many Brazilians here, but for those who aren't, this is a question for us now that it's a democracy question because our evangelical groups are going to the far right movements, and these far right movements are trying to cut our democracy processes, and this is a very sensible in our society and in our players too, because we had and reading Florenzano, reading many authors from sports in Brazil, we know that Brazilian players had political heads were so multiple because we had some uh, right wing players and left wing players in politics. We had, for example, Leônidas da Silva, the top scorer of 1938 World Cup, right, Professor?
Yes.
1938. And he said that he would vote for communists because he was from the people. He was from the labor class, so uh, he could not vote for any other party without the Communist Party. And now we have these Christian evangelical players that are so connected with the far right movements, like Neymar, our greatest athlete this century is Neymar, and Neymar is totally connected with Jair Bolsonaro, with those evangelical movements, and so for us, just finish my speech here. Um, so this process for us Brazilians are too important to be understood because it says too much about our democracy, about which Brazil we are going to build in a future. So it goes further than the sports, further than football, and it this debate is important to see what Brazil will be in the future. This Brazil that you know from democratic place that tries to be friendly face for the world, or Brazil that are connected with uh, a Brazil that is connected with those far right movements with Donald Trump and Jair Bolsonaro. That is, I hope you understand, Professor.
Rodrigo, eu vou pedir para você. Não, eu acho que eu entendi e a gente vai conversando aqui, você vai me corrigindo. Eu vou pedir para você, até para que eu possa responder melhor, né? O meu inglês é bem precário, né? Então, para que eu possa responder melhor, eu vou pedir que você vá traduzindo. Tudo bem? Você pode fazer isso, Rodrigo? Tranquilo?
Ok.
Ok. Bom, então, de início, essa pesquisa, ela está numa fase inicial. E nesse momento, pesquisador sênior, estou só eu. Né? Há uma possibilidade de ampliação, e há 2 convites já feitos e praticamente aceitos, que envolve o professor Luiz Henrique de Toledo, da UFSCar, e o professor Denaldo Alchorne, do Rio de Janeiro. Né? E a gente gostaria de ter mais um pesquisador sênior que fosse professor ou da Bahia ou de Pernambuco.
Mm-hmm.
Assim a gente teria...
So the research is in the initial point. You are the only head of the project, so it's very initial. You have invited 2 professors, Luiz Henrique de Toledo, and the other I don't remember the name, please.
Denaldo Alchorne.
From Rio de Janeiro.
Ele escreveu sobre o futebol e ditadura militar no Brasil.
He wrote about dictatorship and football in Brazil, and then you are planning to invite 2 researchers from Bahia and Pernambuco, 2 Brazilian states, because this can bring an wide vision of Brazil, because you have northeast, you have southeast of the country. Okay, continue.
Exatamente. E Rodrigo, a intenção e a delimitação em 94 para que a pesquisa não fique muito extensa. Né? Nesse primeiro momento é de 94, mas você captou bem. Óbvio que a intenção é ver que país nós vamos ter, né? que Brasil vai aparecer aqui nos próximos anos, né? E também que futebol, né? Qual futebol? Né? Que tipo de futebol estará nesse país? Né? Ter base para pensar esse processo, que é um processo muito complexo, de esvaziamento das práticas, expressões devocionais de matriz africana, silenciamento e perseguição dessas práticas que a gente tem visto nos dias atuais, em lugar delas, as práticas, muitas vezes, não exclusivamente, mas muitas vezes, persecutórias e intolerantes de grupos evangélicos, pentecostais e neopentecostais. Né? Só para arrematar isso, há uma questão aí que eu vejo de racismo disfarçado. O que está no pano de fundo e que eu não toquei nessa exposição, mas que é algo a ser perseguido, são essas práticas evangélicas silenciando e branqueando as práticas devocionais brasileiras, mesmo que essas práticas evangélicas sejam protagonizadas por atletas e pessoas negras. E esse é o paradoxo. Né? Você falou do Neymar. Sim, Neymar é o grande craque brasileiro, o grande jogador brasileiro hoje, né? Com todos os seus problemas. Mas note o Felipe Melo, né? Que não é um jogador com destaque, sem dúvida nenhuma. Né? mas o Felipe Melo e as posições neopentecostais do Felipe Melo e as posições, as propostas fascistas que o Felipe Melo apresenta.
Okay. It's open. Okay. So the intention is to understand which Brazil we're gonna have and which Brazil is going to show the next years and which football Brazil will show in the next years. So what kind of football, what kind of vision of football will be in this country. This is aimed to be a basis to understand this process. That is a very complex process. We have a substitution of devotional practice of Afro-Brazilian matrices, very persecuted, very silenced in our societies by especially groups of Pentecostals and neo-Pentecostals evangelicals. And there is a question here of covert racism, that this racism made by this evangelical practice. It's okay. Are you understand me? Okay, let me continue. So, these evangelical practices are persecuting and whitewashing this in a very bad way. This devotional Brazilian practice. That is a paradox because these evangelical practices are made by black players. So we have a black ancestry here that is being silenced many times by black players, but doing a favor, doing a role for this racist white Christian Pentecostal evangelical project. And Neymar is the greatest Brazilian player right now, but he's not the only one. And we have, for example, Felipe Melo, which had some spot on in playing Juventus, Galatasaray, Palmeiras, but he's not Neymar. And he is in his ideas is very fascist and connected with this evangelical thinkings.
Thank you, Rodrigo, for translating. Thank you, Flavio, for the answer. If anyone has some questions, please raise the hand. I would like to make some questions in the comments about the very interesting subject, actually very surprised to me. And I was thinking about how the has institutionalizations of these practicals, homogeneous practicals today. For example, in Corinthians or many clubs, Tite used to do some prayers before the game, and there's some space dedicated to this in the vestiaries. So the structure of the club allows to some players to do that. And for example, today, that's very interesting. Maybe 10 years ago, Ricardo Oliveira was like a pastor, at the same time was a player as well. So I would like to know, Flavio, if it's in the past, how these connections of these institutionalizations in the 70s to 90s, if there's some change in the past in these terms, how the clubs perceive this change in the players as well.
Eu entendi, Jonathan. Também vou pedir para você me ajudar aqui e fazer a tradução, tá? A tua pergunta é ótima. Essa é a grande questão, é tentar entender, né, quais são os elementos que levaram a essa transformação. Uma primeira intenção, eu não coloquei aqui, a tua pergunta me permite aprofundar isso, Uma primeira intenção da pesquisa, Jonathan, é dar voz a essas expressões mágicas que desapareceram da cultura do futebol a partir da década de 80. Era muito comum nos vestiários dos clubes brasileiros e de todos os clubes brasileiros, em lugar dessa roda de oração, né, dessa pregação pastoral feita ou por um atleta ou pelo próprio técnico, né, era muito comum terem velas pretas, velas vermelhas, né, oferendas práticas de macumba no vestiário, né? Normalmente o massagista, eu usei aqui alguns exemplos, né? O massagista, em geral, o massagista dos clubes era um pai de santo. Ele era um negro que afirmava a sua negritude também pelas suas práticas ancestrais, resgatando uma ancestralidade que remetia a essa cultura de origem africana. Os despachos, né, nas encruzilhadas, né? Então, esse universo riquíssimo, universo mágico riquíssimo, e que tem sido reprimido na sociedade brasileira e praticamente desapareceu no que eu vou falar aqui, numa espécie de higienização neopentecostal. Então, a gente pode identificar uma espécie de higienização. Esses vestiários agora cada vez mais modernos, né? É impossível você acender uma vela no vestiário, porque aí tem risco de incêndio, aí vai haver uma série de... Né? Só que isso significa a eliminação dessa cultura que está imbricada com a cultura do futebol brasileiro, né? Então, o objetivo da pesquisa e aí sim, a partir das entrevistas, é evidente que a gente vai analisar, a gente já está analisando um conjunto grande de reportagens da revista Placar, a gente vai ampliar isso para os jornais. Agora, são as entrevistas, a conversa com os atletas que ainda estão vivos, né? Atletas que jogaram na década de 70. Né? E a gente pode resgatar, a partir da conversa com eles, este universo, né? Esse rico universo cultural que se perdeu. Né? E que se perdeu. Então, já só para reforçar, retomar essas práticas e colocar essas práticas, exibir para vocês aqui, né? Essas reportagens, essas imagens. A gente tem muito mais imagens. Eu fiz uma seleção pequena, né, para a gente poder conversar. A gente tem muito mais imagens lindas dessas práticas, né, desses relatos, dessa cultura, que era uma cultura popular do futebol brasileiro. Né? Isso também tem a ver com uma outra coisa, que é esse processo de gentrificação, de elitização, pelo qual o futebol brasileiro também está passando.
Obrigado. Microphone.
Okay, so the answer is a first aim of these projects is to show and to resgatar. I forgot the meaning. Can you help me, Jonathan? Resgatar.
Recover.
Recover, okay, recover. It's good. Recover these practices that occurred in Brazilian football. It was quite common in the dress rooms. Instead of the praying circles made by an athlete or even a manager, to see red candles, to see black candles, to see offerings. There were normally in the dress room a pai de santo, for those who are Brazilian, an Afro-Brazilian prayer for something like this. And it was a very rich magical universe. The ebos, the offerings in the crossing roads, the candles, and those things disappeared in a neo-Pentecostal hygienization, I don't know, or a cleaning in a very bad view of this. The dress room now is once more modern, and it's quite impossible to light up a candle because the risk of fire. Everything now has the security and so on, and this points for the elimination of a culture that it's very close to our Brazilian football culture. About the interviews, we start with the placar, and then we're going to the newspapers, and after the newspapers or between this process, we can think about the interviews. And the interviews with the athletes, they are still living from the 1960s, 1970s. We can recover this universe again, this rich cultural universe that is lost. So recover this practice and show here to you this all these journals, all these magazines. We can see that there are a quite rich universe. We have so many more data about this, and this is lost in a gentrification of football process.
Thanks so much, Rodrigo, for the translation. Now, Cedric has a question, please.
Well, thank you for giving me the floor. Professor Flavio, please, I would like to know, in fact, by the 1990s, Brazilian football was becoming more globalized. To what extent did globalization affect devotional practices in the football field in Brazil? And I would equally like to know, did the dictatorial regime use football victories as a divine endorsement of national strength? And last question, of course, if the Brazilian football team has been unable to win a World Cup since, I think the last title was in 2002, how can we explain that problem? Is it related to globalization and devotional practices? Thank you, Professor.
Rodrigo, você me ajuda um pouquinho aí, por favor? Eu entendi uma parte. Você me ajuda a traduzir a pergunta do Cedric, por favor?
Até onde eu entendi, primeiramente perguntando, né, como a globalização afetou em todo esse processo dessa gentrificação no futebol brasileiro, e também pensando, né, nessa questão a partir dos anos 90, com o futebol brasileiro ganhando até a sua última Copa em 2002, né, como a gente pode pensar, então, sobre tanto a globalização e essas práticas devocionais dentro da cabeça, né? Dentro dessa esfera de pensamento, dessa psicosfera, usando Milton,
Professor,
de
please,
2002.
sorry, please, I don't really understand the Portuguese language, please.
I'm just translating to him. Do you speak French, Cedric? I can't hear you.
The microphone, Cedric.
Yes, I do speak French.
If you want, you can ask in French, because Flavio understands French so much better than English.
All right. Oui, merci beaucoup, professeur Flavio. Eh bien, je voudrais savoir, en fait, dans les années 1990, la mondialisation s'est beaucoup imprégnée dans le football brésilien. Alors, je voudrais savoir, est-ce que la mondialisation a eu un effet sur les pratiques dévotionnelles dans le football brésilien? Et deuxième question, je voudrais savoir, est-ce que dans les années 1970, le régime dictatorial a-t-il utilisé le football comme une religion dans l'optique de renforcer la cohésion nationale au Brésil? Et la dernière question, bien évidemment, selon vous, si l'équipe nationale de football du Brésil n'a pas pu gagner une Coupe du Monde depuis 2002, est-ce que cela peut être attribué à la mondialisation et bien évidemment aux pratiques religieuses? Merci, professeur.
Merci à vous, Cédric. Je vais essayer de répondre à votre question. Très bonne question. Bien. La première, la mondialisation, la globalisation, elle peut impliquer répondre à cette question. Il y a une façon au Brésil de le jouer bien succédé avec la ostentation. Il y a beaucoup d'athlètes très riches et qui sont l'exemple de la méritocratie et de l'idéologie néolibérale. Cette théologie de prosperity, il y a impliqué avec la mondialisation, hein, qu'il y a début du 19e et 90 dans le monde et au Brésil aussi. La seconde question que vous m'avez posée, c'est aussi très intéressant parce qu'il y a un paroxysme. Les moments de la dictature au Brésil a utilisé le football et la démocratie raciale, la démocratie religieuse comme une affirmation de le régime. Oui, et c'est un grand paradoxe parce que il y a des moments de fait, les expressions religieuses diversifiées et l'expression religieuse de la culture populaire sont libres, sont de fait libres. Et le paradoxe, c'est qu'en la démocratie, le mouvement d'intolérance autoritaire, ensuite de football, et les disputes, Cédric, les disputes avec deux purposes aussi de football, aussi de la société brésilienne. Hein? On vit aujourd'hui, nous sommes ensuite dans ces disputes au Brésil. Hein? Je parle aussi fréquemment que on doit penser le foot dans les relations sociales du Brésil. Il n'y a pas possibilité de penser le foot sans penser les relations sociales du Brésil. Hein. Et la dernière question que me a posée, c'est dommage, mais la réflexion sur la dimension de la mondialisation sur le foot brésilien et comme la mondialisation a détruit le foot brésilien, a détruit la capacité compétitive de les clubs, de les sélections brésiliennes, surtout pour la sortie des grands joueurs brésiliens, la sortie de jeunes players, jeunes joueurs brésiliens. Hein? Cette question, c'est là pour moi, Cédric, c'est la question principale des problèmes de foot brésilien. Hein? C'est la migration, la sortie des jeunes joueurs brésiliens et aussi le mot, mais la fragilité de les clubs et de la sélection brésilienne de foot. Merci Cédric pour votre question. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. Anyone have some more questions? So, yes, I would like to thank Flavio and Rodrigo for translating the answers. It was very amazing presentations, amazing discussions. I'd like to thank to Jean-Michel as well to open the floor to make some connections between Ulibe and USP. Just a few reminds. This is the session 5 of a webinar series that began in February. And I'm very happy to say that in May, we will have the last sessions, the 6 sessions. It's a sessions that's begun with Richard Giulianotti, Anna Kass, David Pavel Brusen, and Kozik the last week. And we keep in touch. I will send more messages, email to inform the next steps. Thank you so much, Flavio. If you want to speak something, that's it.
Eu que agradeço, vou pedir para vocês me ajudarem aqui. Eu que agradeço, meu inglês é bem precário, eu uso mais para leitura, né? Para falar menos, né? Mas eu que agradeço muito aí a presença de todos e todas e a oportunidade da gente bater um papo, conversar um pouquinho sobre uma pesquisa que está ainda em caráter inicial, né? Mas é uma pesquisa que a gente está gostando bastante. A gente acha que tem um caminho bom aí para percorrer. Tá? Eu que agradeço. Obrigado.
So Flavio say that he thanks for everyone stay here, and it's highlighted that is an initial phase of a research. And I would like to say thank you for everyone as well, and see you soon. Bye bye.